Welcome back, Marvels. Dana and I are back, giggling as usual.
Yeah.
Because it's really too bad you can't hear what we say in between taping.
We're talking about social anxiety and we come in cracking up. Maybe that's a good way to slide into it.
Maybe that's just a good way. You know, I keep getting surprised by the fact that people are listening to the podcast. So I'm like wrapping my head around that. Which I'm so happy about. I mean, if you know, Dana and I feel like if we could help one person, that's enough. That's enough. One person once, that'd be enough for Dana and I.
It sounds like it's more than that, which is so cool. Yeah.
It's so cool.
Because both of us were probably the dorky kid who no one ever wanted to listen to. So now that people are actually listening, we're like, oh my God. So
yeah. Someone said
welcome,
that they listen
fellow
to us.
dorks. They're probably
dorks. Well, we have what is that shirt? We've got cookies. Welcome to the dark side. We've got cookies. I think it's like Darth Vader. Anyway, so this is another topic that was brought up by a Marvel in our community, which love. Please. Dana and I read them all. We may not respond to your direct comment, but we definitely read them and we talk about them
that way.
We definitely do. And a great question, which is, hey, you know, I grew up thinking that I was socially anxious this whole time. And now that I'm understanding autism more and more, I'm thinking that there's some of this is related more to my autism than to social anxiety. So it's a great question. It's a great insight too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And when we go into the DSM criteria of autism, one of those three prongs is social, can't do, impoverished or defective or whatever the horrible marginalizing language around social interactions. And it's such a global giant umbrella to put over and doesn't really talk about the subtleties of what's going on at all.
God, it screws the pooch on it.
Yeah. If I had to take out one thing from the DSM, if they said you have to take one thing out of that criteria, what would you pull out? To me, it would be the social one, honestly.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that underneath it that are underpinnings for it, and it just gets blanketed as you're not good socially, or you have no friends, or you don't want friends, or you don't know how to talk to people, or you don't make eye contact, or you make too much eye contact. Oh my God. Yeah. So, and so let's rewind totally. I'm going to do rewind. Social anxiety.
I need a sound effect for that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
In the DSM is actually in there, right? And it really is this pervasive, gets in the way of your life anxiety about social interactions, if we're going to talk about social anxiety, right? So let's just look at that on the surface. It's a descriptor of someone who has a really hard time with social interactions and who is anxious about them. And it could be this vicious circle, right? They're anxious, they have a lot of bad experiences socially, become more anxious, so on and so on. But even then, there's so many things that can feed into that. I'm thinking about one client I worked with years and years and years ago who came in saying she was socially anxious. And really what was going on was she was extremely introverted. And it really was, that was sort of temperamentally who she was. And she had gotten messages from other people and herself over all these years of, I'm doing it wrong. Something's wrong with me. And what we did was sort of unpack what really is inherently you, a little more shy, a little more quiet. She would try to insert herself into conversations because she thought that what you were supposed to do, and then it would come out chunky and clunky, and then people would laugh at her. The breakthrough for her was when I said, all right, so I gave her a homework assignment. She had this party she was invited to that she was mortified about going to. And I said, what I want you to do is purposely not talk a lot, just observe and take off the pressure of having to talk. And she did it, and it changed everything. She's like, no one noticed. I don't have to say things. interestingly, my friends know I'm more introverted. And they, she was afraid they were going to say, "What's wrong with you? You're not talking." No one said that. One person actually said, "Oh, you seem like you're doing really well," because she was just sitting back and observing and watching. And that was really temperamentally who she was. And it changed everything. The frame just totally shifted for her. Took all the marginalizing language out of it and just let her be who she is. Now, in situations where she like had to be social, like at work, like interviewing is really hard. We did a script for that. Like I'm more introverted, I'm a little bit shy, but I'm really good at my job. My job requirement doesn't require that I do a lot of social interaction. And so I want you to know I'm sitting with you right now in an interview and I'm nervous and I tend to be socially anxious, but I'm really good at what I do. And lo and behold, she got the job. She had to like tell them that. And then they had a frame for if she was a little bit awkward and seemed a little anxious socially, even she knew it, but it wasn't what her job was, so it was fine. Right? Are you going to become an HR, human relations person if you're introverted and have social anxiety? No, that's not a good fit for you. So with neurodivergent folks, with autistic folks, the vast majority of us have introversion. I mean, that's research sort of shows that that's measured. We tend to have an anxiously wired way of being. So what I call temperamental anxiety. Because we think about everything. I can remember throwing, a comment out there at a party or something, and then probably my mind went into warp speed and no one reacted. And it was probably really like 1.5 seconds, but in my brain it had been like 10 minutes. And then, or if I said something and someone didn't laugh at, oh God, and it's okay because people say different things, do different things. And this sort of impoverished social skills, I think, is the word you'll see in the DSM criteria. It's really it's learned, and B, it's what you're really saying is autistics don't fit in a neurotypical social milieu, right? What I love, the research that started to show up about 7 years ago, was when you put a room of autistics together, they don't have any problem. The social anxiety is gone. And really, what do you make of that? It means we can talk to people that are similar, right? And we don't have a problem with that at all. I have neurodiverse students. I used to wonder, like, why did they gravitate towards me? And it's probably because we can talk to each other. You'll see us talking. No one's facing each other and like this far away. Tend to give each other more space and look around. And if one person says something kind of dorky and no one else laughs, we help each other with that, or one person will come in and sort of rescue the other person. And we give this overall feeling of you're okay here, right? And then you feel safe versus out there and you put neurotypicals and neurotypicals, no problem. When you put neurotypicals with autistics, that's where these impoverished social skills come from, right?
Well, I mean, if you'd like to know, it actually in the DSM is persistent deficits. Persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts, as manifested by the following currently or by history. So deficits in social emotional reciprocity, deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors, user social interaction, deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. So there's that piece. Let me just say, and Dana, here's how I think about this sometimes as a differential. What's the main difference? And I always go back to, well, where is it coming from? Is it your neurobiology, your sensory system that is not fitting in that place? That's autistic in my mind. That's more autistic or you're neurodivergent. But if it's thoughts based first, oh crap, what am I going to look like? Oh my God, I don't want to look like an idiot. Oh my gosh, what if I say something and then no one ever? That's social anxiety. And I'm not saying there can't be, so they can't be together.
Those layers that you've learned the social anxiety. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe because I'm like, this is like this is just the way I'm wired. I'm wired in a way that really I get overwhelmed quickly. It's hard for me maybe to track multiple things. I can't filter out the foreground, background, and conversation. I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
That's really more neurodivergence in my mind. Whereas,
what's under it? What's fueling that? So you reading those criteria, I'm like, but that's actually this. So the reciprocity thing. Yes, we do reciprocity different than neurotypicals, and there's reasons for that. We get really excited about stuff and then want to say it. We can do like the info dumping. And why do we info dump? We're excited about things, and we're afraid we're going to forget what we need to say, so we want to get it out now. And then the interrupting, it's more like that, oh, I don't want to forget what I'm saying, right? So there's reasons for those things. And so, as a little kid, you're going to have a harder time if you say biting your tongue or holding back to let the other person finish talking, because the impulse, you haven't grown up enough to have impulse control. Like I'll sit there with some of my colleagues and I'll be like, okay, Dana, just let them finish. But I've had to learn that I want to get right in there. And then I'll take notes and I'll write down my points because I'm in a meeting with a bunch of neurotypicals and I have to, right? Versus when I'm in a meeting, with my students, my neurodivergent students, where we're talking, we're like, it's like popcorn. And it just happens. And we're like, oh, this is so great. And we all get to the points we want to make, but it's just in a different way, right? So all those things, the reciprocity, yes. The getting sort of excited about not being able to filter out other things is really more about, I'm afraid I'm going to forget what I need to say. So the skills thing then becomes, is there another way that I can bookmark that so I don't lose that thought? Like you have with the writing stuff down.
I tend to be, I like to put things down, or else they flee my brain and I really don't get them back. Like I really like when how many times have you said, oh, that's such a great idea, and then you're like, I got to remember that for later, and then you never remember it.
Now, half the time we say what it's going to be our next episode, and by the time we log off, we're like, what were we going to do?
Dana, why gotta reveal our secrets? Why gotta reveal our secrets to the Marvels? Dana's not wrong. Like Dana and I will get super, super excited about something. We're like, oh my God, we have to do that. And then Dana literally 10 minutes later will text me and be like, what was that topic? And then I'll be like, I don't remember.
Okay. Something about the going back and forth, we could try to find it, and then we usually figure it out.
We end up getting it there. With some work. What I really, really like, Dana, is this thing of, if you're with your people, do you have relational kind of reciprocity?
Yeah.
It's a good question, because someone will say to me, well, my worry, this just happened to me this weekend when I was working with a family. And they're like, we're just really worried that, he can't talk to everybody. And I was like, well, why? And he's like, well, he only wants to talk about anime. And I said, what's wrong with that? And then they said, well, not everyone wants to talk about anime. And I said, well, then find him people who want to talk about anime and your problem solved.
Nice.
That's the solution. Not, I'm like, I don't want to talk to other people about farming. Yeah. Nothing against farming. If you're a farmer, I'm sorry. It's just not my thing.
Like, you don't know farming. I mean? Why would you talk about farming? Yeah, that's right.
We don't have,
and it's so farming. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, why are common interests? We understand that common interests are what create the foundations of relationships for people, like humans.
Yeah. And I think that's why you see so many neurodivergents gravitating towards things like Comic-Con and those characters, because it's just like the anime thing. We can talk about those things and get really excited about it. And then I'll walk around the house throwing out one-liners for movies. And sometimes my wife knows what movie it is. And other times I think I'm being witty as hell and she'd be like, what are you talking about? But that's also like, we know that about each other. I'm like, oh yeah, duh, I guess you need the context for that. You don't know every line from Moonstruck that I've memorized for years and years and throw things out there. And okay. But when I'm with a group of people that do those things, we can do that. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all farmers, in other words.
We're all farmers. I'm a I'm a band kid.
Mm-hmm.
And in high school I played in a band, and
What instrument did you play?
I played the French horn. Not
Ooh.
well. Not well, Dana, even though I did play throughout high school and college. But I never liked to hear myself, even though I will say this is why I'm a big fan of John Williams' music, because he uses French horns in these soaring, majestic
Yeah.
ways.
Yes. Yep.
But some of my best friends from high school were in band as well. To this day, they're my closest friends. And I laugh because we used to think we were so cool. We would sing our we would be in public places and sing our parts. And it would be out loud, and I'm sure everyone around. And so when my husband was also in the band. And whenever we see band kids do this, instead of being irritated like everyone else, because everyone else is like, oh my gosh, just be quiet. You're interrupting our space. We have this endearing, fond affinity.
Yes.
For this sense of belonging. And this is another thing. And I know that we didn't, okay. I know that we did not set out to do this, but I have a like wrinkle in my cap. Is that what the feather in my, what is it?
I don't know. Tell me what you're
I don't know what the saying is. I have no idea. Okay,
I
anyway.
think wrinkle in your cap or feather in your cap, but they mean two different things.
Well, it's definitely the word. Like, so it must be the wrinkle, because I'm hot about something. Okay. So like going back to
like a wrinkle in your sock for us neurodivergent.
Oh yeah. That's a really good. That's good. I don't wear socks, by the way, for this reason.
Okay.
I cannot wear socks. Anyway, every time we do this show, I'm like,
you realize how much more neurodivergent you are than you. I love it.
The advertising as a neurotypical seems more of a sham. Okay. And maybe that's just the challenge. Maybe neurotypical that label is a sham. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, where was I? Okay. This is my wrinkle in my sock. Okay, here we go. Okay. We in psychology learned Maslow's hierarchy of needs. With the very bottom being safety, and then the next being, having our needs met, and then the next being belonging, and then efficacy, and then actualization or actualizing.
Yeah.
And psychologists aren't the only ones that learn Maslow's hierarchy, but the concept behind this is there are certain things that need to be at play and fulfilled before you can be your best self.
Yeah.
Okay. When in the world did parts of Maslow hierarchy get inverted? Here's what I mean. Fine, we get safety. Fine. We get hunger, and that fine.
Your basic needs being met. Yeah.
But usually, so in the hierarchy, it's belonging and then efficacy. But for whatever reason, this has gotten flipped. It's efficacy, and then if you demonstrate X, Y, Z, then you belong.
Yeah.
This
or even the actualization, because we were on this actualization porn kick of like, do yoga and be self-actualized. So that even sort of in some circles has gotten inverted as well. Yeah.
It's weird. And so I'm having a big issue with this. And I'm having a big issue with this when we talk about inclusion and education and what this looks like and what this actually means. And, but it's almost like, no, you have to demonstrate X, Y, and Z before you belong. And we really need to come back and flip that back again. You find your people and you belong, and then the rest.
That's yes. Right. Kind of like your band geek. Yeah.
Yes. And, or whatever. Like, I like my Star Wars people, and I specifically like my Star Wars, this is where my daughter and I, she's a newer Star Wars fan. I'm an older Star Wars fan. And I get it, because she grew up with Anakin, and she grew up in that era. I didn't. And I get it that she resonate, those prequels resonate with her more than more than me, even though we know who's right, me, obviously. So, but I don't understand why we need people to act a certain way before we accept them.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, and I think someone might take me out of context maybe and say, well, you just can't like go act a fool out on the street and da da da. I'm not talking about that.
Right. Yeah. it's this sort of judging other people, and it's sort of the Mean Girls idea. You don't literally wear the right things, and so I'm going to, scorn you and not talk to you, that kind of thing. Yeah, where's the normal human and reaching out and, like you said, finding people that are like-minded and then belonging? And why do we group to such a degree that goes well beyond, basic survival? Humans are geared a certain amount to be afraid of the other, but I don't have to be so afraid of the other that if I see someone walking down the street without a French horn but tooting their song, to think they're so weird, I'm never going to talk to them. And by the way, they don't deserve to live. I'm going to go in my house and get my gun and mow them down.
Yeah.
Right? Of course not. Versus, this person's clearly just practicing her music, and so what? And actually, for me, it would be like, oh, there's another kind of strange person. I might really get along with them. But so it really is that kind of, why do we have so much of this in-group and out-group thing? And unless you behave a certain way, you don't have that sense of belonging like you're talking about. It should be the other way. Yeah.
It's really, and we know this, like from a social psych standpoint, we understand, and we could get into in-group, out-group, and maybe that's an interesting kind of theoretical framework for us to explore in another episode. But this has been studied.
All the way to autism. Yes, we are wired to be anxious. I don't think we are wired to be socially anxious. I think we learn social anxiety from just what you're talking about, not being part of the in-group and not being understood and everything else.
Yeah, it's like the social anxiety comes secondary because of complex trauma.
Totally. Yeah.
The lived experience says to me, I must guard when I'm in the neuromajority. And that's where that comes from. And I think that's my very simple brain's way of differentiating. It's kind of the way in which we've talked about this before, the difference between OCD and stimming, and that while it, sometimes stims can start and trigger OCD, that happens. But that those two things come from different places. And we need to be able to differentiate those and understand those so that we can help people.
Know what's underneath, so we can deal with what's underneath rather than the symptom. Yeah.
That's right. Hopefully that was helpful. Thank you, Marvel, for sending in that question and that comment. Please, Marvels, we welcome the comments. We really do. It really thrills Dana and I to be it's a surprise and a thrill for us. Our only request is keep it positive, keep it encouraging. That's the kind of community we want to establish. And of course, you can have differing opinions. Just communicate them in a respectful way. That's it. Anyway, all right, Marvels, we will catch you in the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
All right, Dana.
Oh God, I started to laugh so hard.
Oh my God, did you almost pee your pants? I'm like,
no, because I used the restroom, but I was losing oxygen quickly.
I mean, seriously, so funny, right?
There, I did it. You're gonna have to do the bleepy. It's kind of crappy. Sorry, just flew right out. Because now you have to be standing there with your professor saying, I need this extra time. And for someone that needs the accommodations, that requires a certain amount of timing and executive functioning. And if they're already stressed out because they need the extra time, you're going to ask them to come to you after class in front of everybody and saying, I need that extra week for my paper. It's so stupid. So you do, and there's been things written about this. In higher ed, there is a systematic bias against these things, rooted in this false idea of this person can't do the job then that they're studying for if they need this, which the workplace also falls under DSS or disability law, so they can. Now, I would imagine, and I've heard from my wife who works at UW and works within the information school, they're really good about this. And they teach librarians basically over there. And they're all into high tech and digitizing, and it's all about accessibility of information. That's what's called the information school. She says half the professors there and half the support staff and probably the majority of the students that are going into this field are all neurodivergent. So they're all like, yeah, it's all good. And they really do it really well, right? And I'm not saying they do it well there because it's a large university. I think it's because of that discipline in that particular college, right? Tech and those kinds of areas, I think probably there's more accommodation because it's in that field. In our field in psychology, the bias against is so huge. All you have to do is read some journal articles, and we've talked about this before, journal articles in our field and how marginalizing and just mean the language is, disability and deficit and all this language and this kind of stuff. So I have actually heard from fellow faculty of, oh, this person, if they can't do it in the program, how are they going to do it in real life? And I'm like, well, they're going to modify their lives to be a psychologist. Obviously, they may not do it the way you're going to do it. And disability law says you have to give them that leg up so they have at least that equal footing as the person who's neurotypical. And then if they can't do it with the leg up, yes, that could be a problem. But what I see is people saying they're resistant even to the leg up and saying, do we really have to make these changes for this person? Do we have to move around this person? Psychology, and it doesn't make any sense to me. We're in psychology. We're supposed to understand this stuff, right? And there's other fields that are doing this flawlessly. We were talking before we came on, and I see this a lot in my posts on Awake, where people will say, "Oh my God, thank you for being out about this as a licensed, board certified, by the way, psychologist, because I'm in a grad program and I'm terrified of them finding out."
Yeah.
Or I told a professor about it, and they've just blankly looked at me and said, "Well, you can't do this then," right? And I have a bunch of neurodivergent students, and I've had graduate neurodivergent students, which is awesome because we need more of those in the field to understand neurodivergent clients. My almost my entire caseload now is neurodivergent, and they'll say, "You just get me in a way which makes sense, right? If I'm a person of color, is my therapist as a white person going to understand that lived experience as well as a therapist of color? No. For me, there's only so much I can try to understand what it's like to be a person of color, right? And it can never quite get there. And so there's always going to be that chasm versus I'm a neurodivergent person. I can totally get it, right? So we need more of us out there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, here's the piece too, right? What are some of our base assumptions, right?
Yeah.
Like this is the whole heart of the neurodiversity movement. Mm-hmm. This idea that neurological variability is what is normal. Neurological variability is normal. Not having a neuro, right, and not having a neuromajority and a neurominority. This kind of, this is, that's how, that's the problem. There's some problem there, right? There's some problem in the way in which how do you define disability? And most of us that I think are in this place of support and acceptance really define disability through the social lens versus the biomedical lens, right? Your disability is in the social model of disability, your disability looks better or worse depending on your environment and the supports that you receive.
Exactly.
Right? So, that there's the example of, maybe someone who's visually impaired. If you don't have the bumps on the road, the braille on the let's say elevator, audible things at the crosswalk, that person's going to look less independent, or more disabled, if you will, right?
Right.
I think here's what honestly chaps me. There is a difference between approval and access, right? Yeah. I can be approved for these X accommodations, which, by the way, in the United States, if you got any accommodations at the high school level, that fell under a different legal structure, right? That falls under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Mm-hmm. Then and in that model, all of the support or all of the responsibility and accountability is rested upon the adults, the team, and not the student. Yeah. And then you graduate, you move to falling under ADA accommodations under the ADA. And now all of the burden of advocacy falls on you. Yeah. Okay. So there's that one piece. How about if you come from high school with 40 accommodations and then you hit into college, which under the ADA, honestly, there's only 3 main accommodations in the collegiate setting. What do we know those to be? A note taker, extended time, right? And maybe taking your test in a different location.
Quiet. Yeah, exactly.
And then barring like visual or hearing impairments, you could have things brailled or audiobooks, but that's really the extent of it, right?
Yeah.
And now you need people to, Dana, I've heard worse in regards to accessibility, because I think it really always comes down to accessibility, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that I got approved for it. But here in California, there are some schools, which shall go nameless, that okay, let's say you get approved for a note taker as an accommodation. Guess what that person has to do? They have to find their own note taker in class and ask them to take notes. How about this one? Some teachers require that you advocate for the accommodation every time you need it. So every time you take a test, every time you need a note taker.
Which they're not supposed to do, by the way. That's illegal to do that. But they get away with it constantly, right?
Of course, because my clients are like, one, I don't necessarily want to disclose. I don't know these people. I have a hard enough time socially.
Yeah.
And so guess what happens? We get no accommodations, even though, and now it looks like the student doesn't care because you've been approved by DSPS and now you don't.
Yeah. It reminds me of
not good.
Yeah, I had a deaf student many, many years ago, and she had a signer, and you said someone who did sign in the class. That reminds me almost like the note taker thing, right? And we had to pay for it. We had to provide it. How is it different with note taking? And for me, I don't know about you, but if I ever had to miss a class and I just had a friend take notes, I don't understand their notes because it's like unique to your brain versus someone who's trained to do that, which would be the analogy would be like someone who knows ASL, but yeah, that's terrible.
It's terrible. Or even, I think that, and this is so dependent upon the professor or the instructor, so for you, Dana, you're like, hey, let's have this kind of private conversation about what the support looks like
and
what's going to fit you. Yeah.
That's right.
Not in front of people. Privately, right? We don't need to disclose, right? This is important. Okay. But how many professors, the way that a student moves into or utilizes their accommodations is professor or instructor driven.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yep.
If you have an instructor that is not friendly in this way, or heaven forbid, not organized.
Yeah. I think that's
those
part
students
of the problem.
Are sunk.
Yeah. Or they don't, it's not a priority for them. It's clearly a priority for me. And they sort of treat it cavalierly like, oh, well, they requested it, it'll be fine. No, not really. And again, the thing that just always, I just don't understand how psychologists don't get it. But then it goes back to that thing that we've talked about before, whereas the majority of psychologists don't understand neurodivergence now. They don't understand how the DSM it's been collapsed and all of what's in it and how different those things are. Yeah, makes me crazy. So it's not in your head. Those of you that are listening, you're not doing anything wrong. What I have told students if they have another professor is they say, well, should I go back and talk to that professor again? And I say, no, go back to the DSS office because the people that we have in that office are awesome. And then they'll be mama bear for you. You shouldn't have to do that, but go back to them and tell them you're not getting your needs met. It's terrible.
Again, I think what sucks is that the burden of responsibility for advocacy falls on the person that's already struggling.
Yes, right.
And
exactly.
that is a reflection of our healthcare system in the United States. Advocacy is the only thing that results in rights being respected and and you have to hold people accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And most of my clients just don't have the bandwidth for it. I mean, they're struggling as it is.
Absolutely.
So,
Yep.
this really makes me crazy. If you're out there and you're in a grad program, in any way, shape, or form. I mean, like, we've heard this, like one of our Marvels was saying that they were like a communication science, which makes me laugh, because if you're going into like augmentative communication, alternative communication, you'd think that these people would have the assumption and the mindset and the framework for diversity and acceptance, but that's just not the case.
It's just ableism. They want to have people doing that work to be able-bodied, and they're saying you can't do this if you're not. And it's just straightforward ableism. It's terrible.
Yeah. Well, this is the problem with understanding what equity truly is. And Dana and I often go back to this image. I don't have it on me, but this image where it's like the 3 boxes, the 3 different heights of people. They're watching a baseball game. Everyone gets a box, let's just say, because that is what's equal.
Yeah, the same size box.
Right, the same size box. The very, very tall person now who already could see over the fence now can see more. I mean, like, he just has a higher vantage point. The person that could barely, kind of see over the fence, okay, might be more comfortable. But the short person, which, I'm standing at a cool 5'1", so I can relate to this, still can't see over the fence.
Yeah. Right.
No, equitability is that the tall person doesn't get a box, and the short person gets 2. Like,
exactly.
Because that's what is. So equal is not necessarily
equitable. That's right.
Equitable. Those are 2 different things, 2 different ideas that I don't think we get. And I think the other thing too is the question in the comments was, why they're okay with me until they have to be held accountable, until it gets written down, until there's, legal requirements to fulfill. Why is that?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yep. And even then, oftentimes there's like, well, they can't do this barrier's here. They can't do it. It's like, well, if you gave them a taller box, I'm pretty sure they could. Yeah.
Oh, and that is truly the definition of an accommodation. It's that this person could fulfill that X
with that.
Because of their disability.
Yeah. And it has to be, it's reasonable and customary, is sort of some of the language that the disability law has. But you're right. Yeah. They have to be able to do it with the accommodation. So, for example, I'm using a silly example here, and it's totally not, but it'll illustrate it. It doesn't matter what you do for someone who's blind, they should not be a heart surgeon. Right?
Yeah.
Probably not a good idea. I mean, that's the degree to which it's reasonable and customary. Does that mean that person couldn't do a different type of medicine? Maybe they could. But surgery, maybe not. And that's what we're talking about. Does that person with that help, does it raise them to that level of equality with someone else for that job? And they should be able to do it with that accommodation. Yeah. And the bias against that's so big in our field. It's really, I just don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, Dana and I struggle with this, even with bumping into our colleagues in our everyday life. And the best thing that we can do is continue to talk about it, raise awareness about it,
swear about it, and
do it over and over and over. And, I don't think Dana and I are here saying this is, we are absolutists. We're not here to say that. What we are here to do, though, is to talk about issues that we're seeing, to bring awareness to them, and to say, what is our responsibility in this?
Yep. And to just make you feel not alone if you're going through this and you're choosing that hard route of keeping your head down and just trying as hard as you can. Just know that you can get to the other side. Yeah. There are those of us out there that will welcome you to the field, and just know you're not alone. Yeah.
Yes, we need you in the field. We need different thinkers. And by the way, grad school did not prepare me necessarily for the work that I do today as a psychologist clinically. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Did my clinical rotations help me with that? Sure, they did.
Yeah.
Did the history of psychology help me with that? I mean, it helps me answer some questions on Jeopardy,
It
but
helps me know what not to do because historically it's been very bad. Like, don't have sex with your clients and don't put them in a mock prison experiment and see what happens. I mean, yeah, we learned
or
about
maybe
that. So
phrenology is
yeah.
like old school and maybe we shouldn't follow. I don't know. Like, so
Yeah.
so for those of you out there that resonate with this, you're in higher education, college, grad school, right? Don't stop. Utilize your supports. Lean into your supports. Lean into your DSPS, DSS, whatever your disability services are at your college. Grab an advocate. There's advocates out there to help with this. Know yourself. And know that it's okay to get help where you need to get help. Maybe writing is really, really hard for you, and having some writing support could be really helpful.
That's right.
Things like that. Like, don't give up on that. You unfortunately are in a place where the field and our society is not fully embracing here of neurodivergence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
you only swore once, Dana.
That's pretty good. Yeah. My mom would be.
I mean, I'll have to go back and find it, but every time you swear, you put your hand up to your mouth, so it'll be easy for me to find.
You can find it that way. Yeah.
I'll just scrub it that way. Marvels, thank you for being in this community. Thank you for supporting each other. If you want to put any words of encouragement to other Marvels in this community and you are in this position, please do. Yeah. Please do. We love you. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye everyone. Everybody.